So in many ways, this feels like I'm training for the finish line. Like I'm showing my body that I can be an athlete again and that I can do hard things again because I want to, not because I have to. And I think it's going to be very powerful to stand on the summit of Kilimanjaro and look down and think, holy cow, I've climbed a lot of mountains, um, but I climbed this one.
Welcome back again to another episode of the Confident Mompreneur podcast, where we talk to real women from around the globe about real life difficulties and triumphs in momhood, business, relationships, health, and more. I'm your host, Kyrie, ready to give you real actionable advice to help you become the best, most confident version of you in all areas of your life. Let's get into it. Well, welcome on today, Rebecca. I am so excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know you, do you want to start us out by introducing yourself a little bit about who you are, what you do, all of the things?
Yes. So, hello, everyone out there. My name's Rebecca Walsh. I do a lot of things. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm an Army veteran, I'm a breast cancer survivor, but probably the thing that I do that I am known for is for my work at Hike Like a Woman. So, Hike Like a Woman is a outdoor company that I started about a decade ago. And our mission is to just help women get out and explore the backcountry with confidence. And we do that through guided trips and adventure travel all over the world, and then do through some outdoor education opportunities as well.
Yeah, the things that she does with Hike Like a Woman is so cool. We were just talking before we hopped on that she's gone next week on our trip.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, we're headed to Costa Rica. So it's actually, this is a really special trip because it is a co-ed trip. So usually my trips are just with women, but several people asked me and said, hey, can I bring my partner along? And so this is just an all gender trip. So my husband is going to hike like a woman all week in Costa Rica with us. And I think it will be kind of a different experience to have a co-ed trip instead of a women's specific trip, but
Yeah.
we'll try it and see how it goes.
Fair enough. I mean,
Yeah.
that'll be fun, and it's fun that you get to bring your husband along with you because usually you leave him behind to go and do it by yourself.
Yeah, usually he's home with the kids, and that's fine. He loves
Love
it.
that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So Rebecca and I live in the same town in Wyoming, and so we actually met doing a women's entrepreneurship panel years ago, probably like
Mm.
3 years ago, I would
It
say.
was before cancer, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. And then I believe you were also running an outdoor shop here in town
Hmm.
too. So she has kind of done a bit of everything when it comes to the outdoors, but you also stated in your introduction like a few things. You're an Army veteran. So tell me a little bit about what it was like being a woman in the Army and like coming out of that and trying to figure out what to do after Army life, because I know that that's kind of all encompassing when you're in it.
Yeah, I love that question because people are like, what's it like to be a woman in the army or a female veteran? And it's like, I don't know because I haven't been a male in the army and I haven't been a male veteran. So I don't know, but I would say that I'll just give you a quick little background of my army story because it's pretty interesting. So I used to be a very competitive cross-country ski racer and biathlete. So biathlon is this weird sport that combines cross-country skiing with rifle marksmanship.
Oh,
And I was very competitive and I was very good. And I was kind of at that level, I wasn't quite good enough to make the national team and to go to the Olympics, but that was my goal. And so I actually moved from Montana, where I was raised, to Canada so that I could train and race biathlon full time. And my goal was to get enough experience on the Canadian circuit to like come back and then make the US national team. Um, but I started to run out of money when I was living in Canada because it was hard to get sponsors and it's an expensive sport and there's a lot of travel and like skis and ski wax and ammunition and coaching and food and all of the things. And so I went to a race and I saw these guys racing around and they had USA like US Army on their ski race suits. And so I was like, who are you guys? And they're like, oh, we're the Army Biathlon team. We get paid to do this. And their coaching was paid and they got paid to be there, lodging, all their gear. And so I said, sign me up. Like, how do I do this? Um, so I talked to the coaches, and the coaches said, yeah, you're good enough to be on this team. And it is a stepping stone team. So yeah, so as soon as I was done with that winter, I went back to Montana and I rushed to the recruiter's office and I said, sign me up. I talked to this coach. He said I could be on this team, all these things. And the recruiter was like, well, we got to go to basic training. So I went to basic training. And then, yeah, so then I spent the next couple years pretty much skiing full time for the Army, racing and training all over the world. And I never made the Olympic team. I never made the national team, but that's kind of how I got my start in the military. So I was just going to ski for the Army for 4 years and then be like, thank you for all the free skiing all over the world. Um, but September 11th happened shortly after I enlisted, and um, that was a pretty emotional experience for me because I was training full time. I was on this team. I was actually home in Bozeman, Montana, where I grew up, on September 11th between training camps. And my national, I was, my unit called me up and they said, hey, Rebecca, we need you to come and you got to stop biathlon for a little while because you're needed. So I was in the National Guard and I had to go guard the state headquarters or the state capitol during that time because it was like weird, right? Like we didn't
Nobody
know
knew what was going to
we
happen.
didn't know
Yeah.
what was going on. And there was this lieutenant who was really not very smart, and he was in charge of me. And I was just a young private first class, and I was thinking, we're at war now. If if that guy's an officer in the Army, I can do that too, and I might be able to do that better. Like young, humble Rebecca. Oh, she was not very humble. So anyway,
I love
I
it.
eventually made it back. Like I decided that interrupted my training for the Olympics and all the things, and things just kind of changed for me. So I finished up that winter with the team, and then I moved here to Laramie actually to finish my undergrad. Kind of hung up my skis and my rifle for a little while and did ROTC at the University of Wyoming, earned my commission, and then I went on active duty. So then I was an active duty Army officer for the next decade. Two deployments to Iraq. I loved active duty. I had great leaders, great commanders, such a fantastic experience, but I got pregnant. And my husband was an infantry officer. I was a public affairs officer at the time. And the more pregnant I got, the more I was thinking, I can't do this with a baby. There's no way that I can leave a baby and deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan again. And some women have to do that. And like my heart goes out to them, but I couldn't, it was like tugging at me that it was time to leave active duty. And my husband was ready to leave too. He had deployed to Iraq 3 times and we'd spent a lot of our marriage separated because of deployments. And so yeah, we left active duty. My husband, we were trying to figure out where to go. We didn't have jobs, we didn't have careers, we didn't know what we wanted to be when we grew up. Um, but we'd been a lot of places in the Army, and so we tried to think of the last place we had a lot of fun that we could afford to live in. And I wanted to go back to Bozeman because I love Bozeman, but Laramie was the place that just kept coming back on our list of the last place we had a lot of fun. So came here and I left active duty, but I stayed in the National Guard for another 6 or 7 years, just because we needed health insurance while my husband went to law school. So I served about 18 years, a combination of my skiing time, active duty time, and time in the National Guard. So 18 years in uniform, a lot of different experiences from, you know, racing in Italy and all over Europe and training in South America to war in Iraq and then wrapping it all up here. So
That
that's a long-winded story to say, yes, I was in the Army.
That is such a crazy story. Like, who would have thought, like, when you were young, that somehow, like, training for this biathlon would somehow transition into almost 20 years in the military. Like, I'm sure that was not even something that crossed your mind as you were growing up about, like, hey, I want to do this as a career.
No, in fact, my family is not like a military family. My dad did not go to Vietnam, and it was not something, and I was raised in a very conservative Christian home. I've changed a lot since my childhood, but I was raised in a home where women grow up to be wives and mothers. And I just, that just was not something that appealed to younger, adventurous Rebecca. Now I'm really happy to be a wife and a mom, and I'm really proud of that, and I love that. But um, it took me a long time to decide that that was the path that I should take.
Yeah, and it wasn't going to be your whole identity, you know.
No, and it still isn't. I
Yeah.
mean, I love my kids, but I also really love going on big adventures without my kids. And my kids love it when I go on adventures without them too, because they are proud of me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's like something that's super important to say because I feel like, especially as moms, we feel very guilty when we leave our kids for any reason, especially if it's to do something that could be quote unquote selfish,
Mhm.
for ourselves. So I love that you talk about that.
It's so funny you said that because I'm training for Kilimanjaro right now. So we're leaving the end of May to climb Mount
So
Kilimanjaro.
exciting.
My youngest child turns 11 on May 31st, and I am going to be in an airplane headed to Africa on May 31st. And he keeps joking with me saying, "Oh, mom, you scheduled your big climb you're gonna miss my birthday. Blah, 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 blah. You're gonna miss my birthday." And at first I felt kind of bad when he would say, "You're gonna miss my birthday to climb Kilimanjaro." But now as our family is watching all these Kilimanjaro YouTube videos, and as we're like, my family's not climbing the mountain with me. It's a group of women, but they're still like going on walks with me, and it's like the whole family is preparing for me to climb Kilimanjaro. And so I've had to wrestle with, is that selfish? And I don't think it is, because I think as women we need to just kind of take a step back and take care of ourselves,
Mhm.
and we need to fill our own cup before we can pour into somebody else. And I'm sure that you are totally like me in that you spend a lot of your life pouring into everybody else's cup, and you're drained, and you gotta we as women just need to do something for ourselves, be it a huge climb or like a weekend away with our friends.
Yeah.
It's okay. I give you permission.
Yes, I love that. We give you permission to go and do it. Do something
Yeah.
fun for yourself. I
Yeah.
think, like you said, it's so fun when our kids, you know, see that part of us because they see, that we're alive. They get that happy, that joyful version of us. And they get to be a part of it too, even if they're not going and doing it, like you said. Like my son, I'm a big, weightlifter. I love weightlifting,
Yeah.
and my son loves coming to the gym with me, and
Yeah.
he's so comfortable there because we've been in that space for a long time, and he knows that that's my mom time.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's proud of you. I'm
Yeah,
sure he's proud of you.
absolutely. And I'm sure your kids have just grown up in those outdoor spaces doing all of those things with you, so they get it.
Yeah. The problem is, though, every time I go on a trip like this, then they say, "Mom, when are we going to go to Costa Rica? Mom, when are we going to climb Kilimanjaro? Mom, when are we going to do this?" And so it's kind of like I'm doing a little recon for the family. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah.
You're like, I'll go check it out and let you know if we're gonna go or not. I love
Yeah.
so something else that you kind of brought up was like obviously you were in like combat tours. Did you have any like struggles with mental health or anything that came out of that, and how did you work through that?
Yeah, so I would say that my experience in the Army was so positive,
That's
and I felt like wherever I went, whatever unit I was assigned to, I had really good friends. in the
Mm.
Army. And there's something really special about people who, you're deployed with and they almost become your second family. And so I think because I always had such a strong support network of friends around me, and also being married to another
Mhm.
person in the Army who spoke the language and understood the things,
Yeah.
and we could talk about things. I think a combination of really good friends, really good leaders, and a really good husband helped me work through um, some stuff that happened in Iraq. I don't think anyone deploys with the military.
Out unscathed.
Yeah, I don't think they do. And sometimes too, trauma doesn't really manifest itself until later. And so I think both my husband and I have experienced that, maybe some more later effects of what we experienced. I do remember a time when I was really struggling and I had just gotten back from my first deployment to Iraq. My husband was deployed. I was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I was going through a 6-month school, so I was at the career course, a course you have to go to when you get promoted to captain. And I was just struggling and I kept having these nightmares. My husband was wounded on his first deployment, very severely, severed femoral artery. He was bleeding out. His
Wow.
gunner climbed out of the gunner's hatch under fire on his Humvee, and tied a tourniquet on my husband's leg and called in a medevac. So my husband really, he should have died, but I kept having nightmares that I was on the patrol with my husband and
Mm.
he got wounded and I didn't know what to do. So I'd have nightmares that my husband would just be bleeding out and I would just freeze. And I think that those nightmares were just a combination of me being so freshly returned from Iraq and my husband still being in a very scary place because that was his second deployment. And he was in a very dangerous place and an infantry officer. So he was always out among the local people.
Yeah. On those front
Um,
lines. Yeah.
yeah, and at that time, there was so much stigma against talking to a therapist or going to mental health, and I didn't want to, especially I think especially as a woman, I always felt like the eyes were on me because I was in units that were predominantly male, and so I didn't want to go to my commander and say, "Hi, I'm having bad dreams. I need to go talk to someone." But I have a really good friend who was on the first deployment with me and then who was at this school with me. And him and his wife just kind of took me under their wing and really took care of me during that assignment. And I don't even know if I told them about the nightmares that I was having, but it was just nice to come into their home and have um, friends to talk to. So
Yeah.
um,
I'm sure,
that was a
especially being
long-winded answer.
separated from your husband during that time too, that would be so hard.
Yeah, and I was almost jealous of army wives who weren't in the military because they would watch the news and think, "Oh, it's bad," but I was there. And so I knew what was really happening on the ground. And I think because I had that knowledge, it was very challenging.
Even more.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I can't even imagine like being a dual military house, going through all of that stuff and trying to figure it out. But you guys both came out at the same time, didn't you?
Yeah, we left active duty at the same time. My husband did not go back into the guard or the reserves. He just focused on law school while I was stayed in the National Guard at the end, kind of wrapped it up.
Hmm. What do you think are some of the biggest lessons that you took from the military that you use in your everyday life now?
Oh my gosh, everything. I think no, for real, I think everything that I do um is yeah. So in the army, especially as an officer, when I was enlisted it was different, but as an officer, which is where I spent the bulk of my time, um I learned how to manage resources. So how to manage people, how to manage time, how to manage a budget even, how to manage my own health and fitness. So it's like all of that managing resources was so important. And it really comes into play, when I owned a retail store and a ski shop, like all I was doing was being an Army officer at that point because I was managing the budget and the schedule and the people and the emotions.
Mm.
And except people didn't just like click their heels together and say, yes, ma'am. And it was different. It was different. But yeah, so the Army taught me how to lead and how to manage. And I'm so glad that I left the Army when I did to be a mom, but I'm also so thankful for my experiences in the Army because they it really made me tough, like pretty tough, like jumping out of airplanes, hanging on runs with the guys.
Physically tough
Uh,
and mentally tough.
yeah, absolutely. And it also I saw so much that I'd never experienced growing up in this little yuppie ski town in Montana. I just the diversity within my units. And I learned that not everybody came from a home where mom and dad loved them and they had 3 meals a day and everything that they could ever want. And so it was very humbling for me to know that not everybody had this privileged life that I had growing up. And also all over the world, my last deployment in Iraq, one of my jobs was to help teach women English at Tikrit University and Tikrit Women's College. So I would go to these colleges with a security group and some women who were part of the State Department, and we would teach Iraqi women English. And so I learned to really be thankful to be an American woman because we have so many privileges and so many rights, and it's our system is not perfect, but man, there's no other country I would want to live in as a woman.
Yeah. I'm sure that gave you a lot of like just different ways of thinking. I think when you grow up in like a small rural town, like you're very one track mind, and that kind
Mhm.
of opens you up, those experiences and things. And I'm sure like that time in your military career, whether you were like skiing or, on your deployments and things, it just kind of opened you up to the experiences that travel and those types of things can bring for you.
Yeah, yeah, just shows a whole different world and just
Yeah.
really made me appreciate what I have.
Fair enough. So you started going on these hike like a woman trips, you said 10 years ago.
Mhm.
How did you decide to do that? And like, what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah, well, one of my jobs in the Army was as a public affairs officer. And so my last deployment to Iraq, I had all these embedded reporters come. So a reporter from like Fox News, New York Times, whatever, would come to our unit. And then my job would be to take care of that reporter. So to make sure that they had food, make sure that they had water, make sure that they had a proper safety equipment, make sure that they could get to where they needed to go all over the province to get the stories that they needed. And so I learned a lot about how to um like how to take care of people as all these reporters would come in not knowing what to expect in Iraq, and they would be my responsibility, like my child to protect on the battlefield. And I really loved that part of my job, just showing the reporters all over northern Iraq and showing them our unit and like letting them experience it. And so when I left active duty, I wasn't quite sure like what to do with my life, and I needed a job. And then the local outdoor retails. Oh, so I started Hike Like a Woman because I started a blog basically about like how to hike with my kids,
Mm,
and that turned into Hike Like a Woman. And then I started just kind of leading trips, like leading local group hikes. So not really trips, but just like setting up local hikes and for all my friends and friends of friends. And so I started a hiking group, the Little Laramie Hikers, and we'd hike every single Friday morning with our kids. And then when I bought the ski shop, I needed another form of revenue because I realized retail is a really hard way to make a living.
hmm
And so then I got permits and just started offering guided backpacking trips just in our local mountain range. And so that's really kind of how it started. It's just started from leading local hikes and hiking groups and to figure out how to be a guide and how to handle the logistics and the permit and the risk management, getting risk management training and wilderness first responder training and And I'm looking at mental health, wilderness first responder training, which I'm really excited about, but just trying to figure out what I needed to do to build my resume, so that I could be a good guide, taking all of the experience and knowledge that I had from the Army.
Yeah. It like talking about your army experiences and the things that you were doing like in your job within it, it totally makes sense to me now. But
Yeah.
like I was just like, how do you do that? That's a lot, to like, be a guide for a whole group of women that most of them probably have never done something like this before,
Hmm.
you're in a totally different country, like all of the logistics that go into that, like it's a lot to handle. I am so impressed that you're able to do it.
Well, I've cheated now. So after cancer, I decided I didn't want to be the one that was like the guide. So now I contract out
Mm,
the guiding companies, and so I just go along as the trip leader. So if the guides needs help, I can help them, but I'm not in the official guiding role right now, and I like that. I'm more of the like the cheerleader, the person with the extra snacks, and then the person who like keeps the morale high, keeps the good vibes going, and then like making sure that all the information about the trips is communicated before, during, and after the trips. So I'm kind of evolved since then.
well, yeah. And that's the
Yeah.
whole point. Obviously, when you started, you were doing like these little tiny Friday morning hikes with your kids, and now you're leading a group of women up Kilimanjaro. I think there's a little bit of growth that's gone on
Yeah.
throughout that. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you brought up that you went through breast cancer too, which was kind of right after you and I met. You went through that, and it kind of shifted everything for you too.
Yeah. Yeah. So um, yeah, breast cancer is hard to talk about because it's still such a fresh wound in my body. Um, but yeah, I after a summer of guiding, so after the summer of 2021, I guided a bunch of trips that summer, and it was October, and I was at a field trip with my kids, and they were hiking up at Vidavoo, one of our local outdoor recreation areas, and I tripped and fell, because my knees were hurting, and one of my knees just like gave out on me.
Mm.
And so I was like, ooh, something is wrong with my knees. And I thought they like maybe I had messed something up when I was guiding or something. I didn't know. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like checked out my knees, did some, you know, took some pictures of my knees. It was fine, but the doctor was like, you haven't had a mammogram, and you need to start having mammograms. And I hadn't been to the doctor in like a decade because I was really healthy, right? I didn't know I had cancer growing in my body.
Yeah.
So he was like, yeah, you need a checkup, you need a mammogram, you need all of the things. And he was like, are you doing self breast exams? And I was like, no, why would I do this? Like I'm fine. So I went home from that doctor's appointment, and the next morning I did a breast exam, and I checked my breasts in the shower the next morning, and sure enough, I found a lump. Um, it was pretty big, and it felt like old Play-Doh that had been left out. And so I was like, oh no, oh no. So I called the doctor, and I go to the VA for all of my healthcare except for cancer related stuff. So I called the VA, and I said, found a lump in my breast, and they said, we can get you in a month. And I said, that's not soon enough. So the next day I hopped in my car and I drove down to the VA, and I said, listen, I have a lump in my breast and I'm not leaving until I talk to someone. So I talked to the doctor again, and he did an exam, and he was like, yeah, let's get you in for a mammogram and an ultrasound. And and I was like, okay. So anyway, it was, as I was leaving his office, the nurse was like, oh, don't worry, it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. And I was like, in my mind, I knew that it wasn't fine. Like I knew the second I found it that it was cancer. Like I just had this feeling. Anyway, I did all that mammogram, ultrasound, that led to a biopsy. The biopsy led to a cancer diagnosis. And then I had surgery, I did chemotherapy, radiation. Now I'm 2, yeah, 2 years. 2 years out. I was diagnosed December 7th, 2021, and I have to take these nasty pills every day that kind of make me feel sick, and I'm still healing from cancer. It doesn't just go away. It's kind of like once you're strapped into the breast cancer roller coaster or the cancer roller coaster in general, you just keep doing loops over and over again.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I'm at with cancer. No cancer right now, but it's it's hard.
Still terrifying, I'm sure. Yeah, we have had another breast cancer survivor on here, and she talked about the know your lemons and how to do like the physical breast exams and that we should be doing those regularly and things. But I do think it's interesting, like women know their bodies. We know when something's wrong, like even the thing in your knees, like you're like, I know myself well enough to know that something's going on and it just happened to lead you into this. But I do think it's important that, we do take care of our health, and even if we think we're healthy, we go and get checked out. Because, like you
Yeah,
said, you were so healthy. You were hiking and doing all the things. And, like, on the outside, I'm sure you looked like the epitome of health.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing how you can. I felt like I was going like 100 miles an hour, and then I just came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And I think I had lunch with my aunt yesterday, and she is finishing up breast cancer treatment. And um, I was trying as I was just talking to her, I was trying to figure out what has there been any good that's come out of breast cancer?
Mm.
Um, and I can think of a lot of bad that came out of cancer, but also, I think that I'm getting far enough away from it. It's like delivering a baby. The trauma's
Your
still
mind
there emotionally,
magically forgets
but like
about
a
it.
year later and 2 years later, it's okay. But
Yeah.
but I think that in so many ways, finding the lump in my breast might have saved me because I was working nonstop at my retail store. I was gone all the time. I was stressed out about money. I was in debt up to my eyeballs at my shop. I was not. I thought I was happy, but I wasn't happy. Um, and I was putting so much pressure on myself to succeed and to meet everybody else's expectations of me, or what I thought everybody else's expectations of me were. But looking back, since that time, like I've sold my shop. I'm
Mm.
basically retired now. I can work on Hike Like a Woman full time. Um, we don't have any debt. We don't have a mortgage. Like there's no pressure on me at all to make money and to have Hike Like a Woman make money. And that that is so amazing, to just be able to do what I love, and that's help women get outside and explore. And if I make a couple bucks, fantastic. And if I don't make any money, it's fine. I can keep doing what I love.
Mm.
And so had I not found that lump, I think I would still be at a busy shop downtown trying to figure out how to make it work and stressing out about everything that comes with owning a retail store and a ski shop. So I'm thankful because it forced me to come to a screeching halt, but now that halt has turned back into a slow jog and and given me the freedom and flexibility to like go all in on Hike Like a Woman for the first time in my entire life.
I love that. I think that's such a good, like, perspective to have, and I know it's hard, especially when you go through something really difficult and traumatizing, like to find those kind of glimmers of hope somewhere.
Yeah.
But especially in that moment, but like you said, kind of looking back now, you can see how it impacted in a good way. And I think that's one of the best parts of like trauma and things is it makes you like reprioritize, and it makes you really stop and think like, is this what I want my life to look like, or what what does my future need to be for me to actually be happy?
Yeah. And it also made me realize, who are my friends and who do I want to have in my life?
Yeah.
And it brought my family so close together, and my children are so kind and so compassionate when
Mm,
they see someone who's sick or struggling. I think there's this deep sense of empathy that they did not have before they helped me walk up and down the stairs during chemo.
mm,
It's brought my husband and I so much closer together because we just realize how fragile life is. And um, and I feel also, this is me getting super vulnerable, but I feel like I'm a ticking time bomb.
mm,
And I have my funeral planned. We redid our wills. We did redid the trust for our boys, and um, I don't want it to sound grim or morbid, but in the army, I was prepared to die. I was prepared to give my life for my country because I'm so thankful to live here, and I believed in what I was doing in Iraq. Um, but it was different because I was married to another soldier, and so it was a different thing. But I just think about death a lot differently now than I did before.
yeah. No, I appreciate you getting vulnerable because I think that's really hard to talk about. And, especially with cancer, like breast cancer, my mom's best friend went through cancer and, she would go into remission and then it would come back and then we would go through it all over again. And
Yeah.
it's really difficult, and I'm sure every time you step into that doctor's office, you're terrified at what the result is going to be walking out of there. But also, like you said, it forces you to kind of live in the moment and really put everything out there. And like you said, like you're hiking Kilimanjaro here soon. I'm sure that was probably on your bucket list for a while, but now it's kind of been pushed up like, nope, there's no better time than now to do this.
Yeah, and Kilimanjaro is kind of fascinating because there's a woman that I follow on Instagram. Her name's Lyra Skirt Girl Hikes or something like that. Um she lives in Africa, and she
Mm.
had colon cancer, I think. Like right before, like a year before I was diagnosed. And so she climbed Kilimanjaro like 2 years after her treatment ended with like a colonoscopy. What's that bag? Like the bag.
Oh,
I,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, the bag with all of their waste in it. So she's like had to learn how to just adjust um to life after cancer. And so as I'm like sitting in the chemo chair trying not to throw up again, I'm looking at her getting ready to climb Kilimanjaro and her climbing Kilimanjaro. And so in the chemo chair, this kind of became a like a finish line goal for me. I needed a finish line. I needed something to say, like, I did that and it was really effing hard, and I'm proud of myself, and I hope I never have to do that again. But if I do, I know I can do it. And so in many ways, this Kilimanjaro climb became symbolic for me because I was watching her climb after going through something similar to what I had gone through. And um, so in many ways, this feels like I'm training for the finish line. Like I'm showing my body that I can be an athlete again and that I can do hard things again because I want to, not because I have to. And I think it's going to be very powerful to stand on the summit of Kilimanjaro and look down and think, holy cow, I've climbed a lot of mountains, um, but I climbed this one, and I think it's going to be so exciting. I hope I make it to the top.
You'll
but,
do great. I've
but
seen
if I
all of
don't, that's
your
okay.
Instagram stories of you training and doing
Oh
all
my
of the
God.
things, so
Yeah, yeah, it's been a lot. Yeah.
no, I think that's so cool though. And like you said, those metaphoric like mountains that we climb, like I look back at your story and all the things that we've talked about and seems like you've climbed mountain after mountain after mountain. This is just another one, a literal physical mountain for you to climb.
Yeah, the finally I get to climb the one I want. But you have too. Like when I think about you and your life, you've you've overcome a ton. And it's powerful. And I think those are the stories that need to be shared. The stories where it's like, yeah, you can do it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's so funny that you talk about that because my Hike Like a Woman video was literally about like mental health is like hiking that mountain and, how those two are kind of tied together in a lot of different ways. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that,
Yeah.
so you not only do trips, but you're doing your first ever virtual summit for Hike Like a Woman. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I, you know, when I was so sick and I was just kind of trying to recover mentally and physically as I was finishing up chemo and starting radiation, I was listening to a podcast about a virtual summit and I thought, oh, I want to do one of those. I should put one of those together. That would be really fun. And then it took me like a year before I had the energy and time to put it together. But anyway, a virtual summit, for those of you who don't know, it's basically like an online conference. So it's a bunch of speakers with really inspiring stories and messages or teaching something, an outdoor skill. So yeah, we're hosting our first virtual summit here in May, and it's going to be really exciting to share so many stories. And you're a speaker, and you have an amazing. I actually haven't listened to it, but I'm sure it's amazing. You put together a presentation, and I think there's going to be. I think we're down to like 34 other presenters.
That's awesome.
And it's just a really great chance to connect women in the outdoor education space and also like the health and wellness space too, because I'm realizing how much of the outdoor space is so overlapping with health and wellness. And so I wanted to like I wanted to broaden this up and not just have it be about like hiking, camping, backpacking, adventure travel, but a multitude of other topics. So anyway, that's going to go on in May. And I don't, if you're listening to this podcast way after May, we're gonna sell tickets through October. So it will all be recorded and anyone will be able to watch it even after the summit itself.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been listening. She's got her own podcast where she's been interviewing some of the people that are going to come on and talk at the summit and stuff. And it's so cool to hear everybody's stories. And there's some amazing women that are going to be on there. And just literally talking about everything, outdoors, like how to actually get into it, the logistical side of things, but also, like you said, like the mental health, the physical health portions of it. I think somebody was doing something on like body confidence and those
Mhm.
types of things. So there's like a whole multitude of things that you can learn through it.
Yeah, and it's just kind of the chance to amplify some women's voices um who might not have as large of an audience as Hike Like a Woman. And so I think it's going to become an annual thing. I think it's going to grow and I think it's going to get better and better every year. And I'm really excited for it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm excited for it too. Obviously, because I'm speaking, but also I'm excited to listen to everybody else's stuff too. So,
Yeah.
um, what else do you have going on that people should be on the lookout for? What other trips do you have coming up? Where can we find you, the podcast, all of the things?
Yeah, so you can find me over at hikelikeawoman.com. Also, we're super active on Facebook right now, which is really weird. No one's on Facebook anymore, but Hike Like a Woman audience is there. So, yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We have a podcast. We have shows that drop once a week now. We were doing twice a week to promote the speakers, but now we're back to once a week. A YouTube channel, I try to publish a YouTube video every Friday. And then, yeah, as far as upcoming trips, they're all listed over on our website. But this trip to Kilimanjaro in June is sold out. But then we are headed to Alaska in August, Yellowstone in September, Peru in October. Peru is going to be pretty fantastic. We're going to be doing the Salkantay Trail, which actually goes like up and over Machu Picchu. So it's kind of a combination of some urban time and then also some days on the trail. And we'll have full support with guides and porters on that trip to Peru. We're going to Iceland next February. So I'm excited. It's supposed to be one of the best years to see the Northern Lights. So we're going to Iceland, and this is going to be more of like staying in hotels, hop on a tour bus every day kind of trip. So not a lot of like adventure, but a lot of sightseeing. We are going to be giving away one free trip to a trip we're going to be taking to Southern Utah next May. So we're giving away one of those free trips at our summit to a summer summit participant. And then we're going back to Kilimanjaro August of 2025. So we're already about 18 months out with our travel schedule. I think I'm going to have to climb Kilimanjaro every year for the rest of my life because it is by far our most popular trip and it's the trip that sells out the fastest. So
Cool.
yeah, I have up until July of 2025 booked or August, September. I'm sorry, August of 2025 with Kilimanjaro.
That is
It's a
awesome.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot, but that's great. And it's so cool that like obviously you're doing well in like getting women involved in the outdoor community and excited about it, and that is huge. So I love that.
Oh, thank you.
Especially as a Wyoming girl. We love our outdoor spaces.
Just don't tell anyone it's so ugly here.
Yeah, so ugly. You
Don't come.
definitely should
The
never go
worst.
hiking in Wyoming.
Never. Never.
Awesome. Well, this has been so great. I'm so glad that we were finally able to get together and do it. So thank you again, Rebecca. And everybody go and check out her and Hike Like a Woman and the upcoming summit.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks for coming to this week's episode of The Confident Mompreneur. If you loved today's episode, let us know, share to your stories and tag us, send to your friends, give us a rating, all of the things, and make sure to check out our guests and follow them on all of the links that we listed above. If you're looking for me, you can always find me at The Confident Mompreneur, and you can also check it out www.theconfidentpost.com for a blog relating to today's episode. I am so happy you're here, and I hope to see you again next week.